Mr. Cody Lambert, thank you for having us out to your place.
Hey, thanks for coming.
It's beautiful out here.
Thank you.
You've been working on – how long have you been at this place?
Bought the land at the end of 2010 and built this arena and stuff where we're in right now in 11 and lived here since early part of 11.
Have you always been in the Bowie area?
I had a place in Henrietta for 18 years, about 25 miles from here. Then we moved out west, out by Abilene to Merkel there for we were there 9 years, I think, and then kind of missed this part of the country, and we bought this place.
Yes, it's pretty. Like it's got some mesquites and the grass of like almost West Texas, but it's also got plenty of oak trees.
Well, I hope you didn't see any mesquites out there.
Not on this place. No. I saw them on the drive.
If you saw a mesquite, we missed it.
Yeah, I saw them on the drive, just not on this place. Yeah. Well,
I've got about 4 or 5 that we need to get.
While I have you here, I have a few bulls that I think you're going to like to take to the next event.
I don't do that anymore.
Do you still get people sending you?
No, not too much anymore, but I haven't done it since the end of 2022. So I've kind of missed that, but I do get calls occasionally from the stock contractors asking me what I think or something like that.
Trying to get you to sneak one in?
Well, no, because I really don't have anything to do with it, but except Riley Gagnon, the guy that does that now, I did spend a lot of time with him, training him for the job, and we talk quite a bit, and I get a call every now and then somebody that wants me to try to influence him, and it's not he's done such a good job that he doesn't need any help.
Is there a process, or is it really just kind of bulls that he likes?
It's really you look at every bull like he's going to get ridden. Mm-hmm. How many points can they be on him? At the end of the day, to make it really simple, is if there's 2 bulls that are equally difficult to ride, but one of them you can be 84 on, and the other one you can be 87 on. The one that you can be 87,
right,
is going to go.
But I guess how many outs would he want that bull to have had, and how proven would a bull need to be?
Well, ideally he'd have one that's been ridden before. You see what he's going to do tomorrow after he gets ridden today, and you kind of get to know him better. But at some point, you've got to take a chance on one that looks real promising, and might not have been to town, and he might not have been in front of the big stage or the bright lights or any of that, but he's done everything he's up to that point. So you got to take a chance, but you don't want to have a whole pen of those kind of bulls because some of them will fail.
Yeah, that's a good point. How forgiving? I guess just the better the bull, you might let them have an off day if it were something that's been proven, but when you do take a chance, I guess if they make a fool out of not make a fool, but you get a rewrite on them.
Well, yeah, you've got to be able to identify the problem. If the bullfighter was too close and they're kind of mean or something, and they follow to him, or the gate man opened the gate too slow and they turn back too short and hit their head or something, you've got to be able to. But if they gave up, if they did something that was totally on them, then there's too many good ones to even worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Dang. Yeah, I got so many questions. There are too many good ones. And has it progressively, do you feel like even maybe in the last 5 years? I mean, how different are the bulls in the last 5 years than maybe?
Well, it's a lot longer process than 5 years, but it's been about a 20-year process. The guys have gotten so good at handling the bulls and recognizing what they're breeding for and what they're wanting out of them. And now the bulls have turned into athletes that are have a style. They check all the boxes. They're judged on how high they jump, how high they kick, direction changes. So when a bull spins, he's gone north, south, east, and west on every round. It's not he's just gone spinning one way. It's not just left or right. But if he's changing directions as he bucks, then intensity, some of it's their strength, some of it's their speed, some of it's how much thought they put into it, how much effort they put into it. And then the last one is degree of difficulty. And those categories, when they check all those boxes, to compete and win with those kind of bulls at ABBI competition or in the PBR or something like that, they know what they're wanting now. The owners know what they want out of them. So it's gotten a lot better because you don't see the phony ones and the freaks that often that are just weird, that get you on the ground but don't look that special or anything like that. Those kind of bulls can't win anything, so they're eliminated before they get to the pro level. So it's been a long process, but the last 5 years, as you say, there's those bulls that are like the great cutting horses. They just can hit the ground. So it's like they buck harder than ever before, but they hit the ground light on their feet. Mm-hmm. At the same time, they're ready to go.
What was your mentality when you set up a pen over the years? Like, I mean, I know there's such an array of bulls out there that, you know, there's buckers and then there's spinners and eliminators and, you know, TV pin, quote unquote. Like when you were matching those bulls up with each event, how did you approach that with making it even?
Well, when we started the PBR, I was looking for bulls that I did this for 30 years. Mm-hmm. So when we started the PBR, I was looking for bulls that they could score at least 80 points on, because in those days it was one stock contractor would have the rodeo, and he might have 4 really good ones and one superstar and 3 of them that you can win a bottom hole check on, and a bunch of
jump kickers,
a bunch of them that just filled the truck because he had to have this number of bulls. And so we started doing it with multiple stock contractors and telling them, we're going to pay you more money than you got paid before for leasing your bulls, but these are the 8 bulls that I want. And they look at you and say, well, wait a minute, I've got to bring 20 or I can't go. Dang. And so then we'd have to say, well, you can't go then because we're going to get better bulls. And so that was the process in the beginning. And we were just trying to get bulls that you could be 80 points. The goal in the year 1 PBR finals, 1994, my goal was to have all 20-point bulls and above. Mm-hmm. Well, 30 years later, a 19.5-point bull is a reride in the PBR now, you know. Yeah. So like lots of the bulls that were at the first PBR finals you'd get a reride on them today. And we thought it was the best. It was the best pin of bulls ever assembled for one event. Mm-hmm. And so that was the goal, to get bulls that they can score higher on, and then don't get caught up in their bucking styles and trying to match them up too much, because you'll wind up with 13 bulls and you need 45. You know,
right?
So I looked more at how their potential points, mm-hmm. and then if one of them was way harder to ride than all the rest of them, or way more dangerous than all the rest of them, when they ride him, they better win first. Mm-hmm. I didn't cut bulls because they were too good, but right. If one of them was way more dangerous than the other one, and they ride him and they win 4th, you would never see him again, because the guys are doing this for a living, and it just didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't turn down bulls because they bucked too hard, but I tried to make sure that if one of them was harder to ride, then you could definitely win on him.
Gotcha. I guess it took some time, but eventually got to the point where you could have an event with really good bulls anywhere in the country.
It got to that point 10, 15 years into the PBR because we paid better than other places did. But we also had the judging criteria made a big impact on it, because when we started teaching the judges how to score bulls, then it became an idea of, we know what we're looking for, and you should know what we're looking for as a stock contractor. And it got a lot better then.
How impactful was it when they started having like fraternities and, letting the stock contractors compete?
That taught us how to judge. That's where we learned. That's when we came up with a system to judge. It was actually Joe Merrick and Jim McLean probably had more to do with the judging system than people ever know. They put a lot of thought into it. Joe was running the ABBI at that time, and Jim McLean was putting on some fraternities and those sort of thing, and they came up with a criteria for judges, and then we got really. I got involved in a few things, and we taught seminars, and we didn't mark a bull 21 because we thought he's a 21. We marked him a 21 because
Gotcha.
He was a 4-in buck and a 5-in kick and a 4-in direction change and a 4-in intensity and a 4-in degree of difficulty, and it came out to 21.
Mm. It made me that you saying that like just kind of made me remember the deal they tried to put on the flank. Did that ever pan out where it would and that's not over. That's kind of AI before its time. Yeah. But we bucked 1,000 bulls in this arena here with the dummy on them. Mm-hmm. And that's what scares me so bad about AI, because at the end of it, these scientists from Germany, they had these sensors, and they had them on the flank and the dummy that was on them, and they'd get the data, and then they'd come sit right here where we're sitting, and they'd get me to score the bulls. And so at the end of the day, all of that AI was traced back to my opinion of what I thought the bulls were. was so I thought, well, why don't we just train the judges if we're going to it's going to come down to one man, right?
Why don't it just come down to 3 or 4 men or 5 men or something and get some experts that can score them.
Right.
And so we did do a lot of that, and sometimes it worked, but sometimes a sensor would fall off, or sometimes one of them would malfunction. And at the end of the day, it's still better to have a human judging, a human that has some knowledge watching and scoring them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a coach with Trevor on the Kid Rockin' Rodeo. And it was, to me, I've never been more fascinated with timed events, watching them go like two calf ropers at the same time, because you're watching a race and the entire crowd can tell who won, but we kind of still ran into that dilemma with there's only buck and horse deals in that deal since it's during the PBR finals, but there still has to be a judge tell the crowd who won, and then the announcer has to explain why. And it's such a dilemma, but on the flip side of that coin, we all know how the crowd will react when a horse rears up. But as bucking horse riders, it's maybe the easiest trick to ride when a horse pulls it on you.
Well, there can be things where you need an expert to judge, and then there are things that are just obvious, like when you watch certain bulls buck, and the bull riding is really the easiest one to understand for.
That's true.
That And but there are always ideas and ways to come up with like the Kid Rock Rodeo, the timed events going at the same time was the funnest part to watch.
Oh my gosh.
It was the funnest part to watch on television, but you got to get better. We got to get better. The PBR's got to get better at the production of the thing like that, because you can't have guys going to sleep in the stands and then having to wake them up and make them leave because it lasted too long. Not because it wasn't exciting, but it lasted 5 hours, and it's just 4 hours and stuff. So it's got to get the value there. The competition is great, and it was like the steer wrestling was, it was the highest level pros. Looked like they're at a high school rodeo chasing them around and stuff, but it was fun as hell to watch them compete, because they were competing. They were the guys that were still trying to win could still win running one around like that and catching him along the fence. And so it was a throwback in lots of ways to when those guys started, but it was at the same time the highest level pros competing.
Yes, sir. Hey, I didn't think about that part. I did, but the one event we won at at last year's event was calf roping, and watching Corey Solomon and Tuff Cooper go up against each other was just, golly, it was neat to watch. But yeah. So I know everybody asks these age-old questions, but we were talking in the car on the way here that some of the questions might be cliche, but it's just neat to hear some of your guys' different perspectives on it. But as those bulls have changed, do you feel like the bull riders have changed?
Ever since I started riding bulls and punching fools, I've been wearing an American hat because I'm an American. I actually wore a different hat before that for the longest, but then my mom got a job. So wear an American hat, old son. Otherwise, you ain't no cowboy.
Well, the bull riders, yeah, I've spent a lot of time with this. There's always one or two really good ones every single year. But as a whole, the bull riders regressed as the bulls got better for quite a few years. And Ty Murray and I were bitching about it one day we're in Madison Square Garden, and we were kind of bitching about some of the guys were there, and they looked like they were there to tour New York, and they weren't there to try to win something. And and then there were a few that were focused, but it was just a handful. And we were wondering what's going on here like this. And this guy that was the CEO at the time of the PBR he was the CEO for a short time. Jeffrey Pollock was his name. Didn't know anything about bull riding, but he said, "Well, you guys ever tried to help him?" And I thought, my gosh, the last 25 years we've been building the sport. We've been trying to expose it to more people, trying to get more money for the riders, trying to get better television, trying to get all of these different sponsors, trying to get everything. But we dropped the ball there. We let this slip, the passing of the torch to the next set of bull riders. We let that slip through the crack. They were having to learn this from whoever or wherever when the guys that started the PBR, which a lot of people consider one of the best, or if not the best, group of bull riders at one time. Well, it hit me and Ty that day, and I think, gosh, we should have done more to try to help them. We felt like we're working for them 24/7, trying to make the sport better and bigger and make the stage bigger and everything like that. But that was the one little fundamental thing that we didn't pass on, and rodeoing in our day and stuff, it got passed on because as you got better, you got to go to the bigger rodeos, and only the best guys were at the bigger rodeos. And so you're around those guys, and and pretty soon you're acting like them and thinking like them and stuff. So, and then as the ones get old and they're not as focused as they were, they're physically not able or something like that, they drop off, and a new group, and you might be one of those guys that the other kids are looking at, and they're learning, well, as we were getting the sport so good, you're in there and out of there so fast that you didn't spend any time together. And in the last 3 years since PBR teams has come along, they spend a lot of time together and a lot of time with coaches. And the bull riders are right now in the PBR have caught up with the bulls. Only in the PBR. It ain't in the PRCA. There's Stetson and Stetson, Kai, Tristan Hutchins, and Wasey Shala they're stepping up. Like them guys are good. And there's a few, but they don't get on the kind of bulls that they get on in the PBR day in, day out. They get on one every once in a while, but at the elite level of the PBR, you get on a bull that you could win any rodeo on every single time. You could win first on every single time, and it's just a little tougher bull. It's just a half point to a point better bull, but that separates a lot of people when they get that good. And so in the PBR, these guys that have spent 2-3 years on teams now have stepped up in a way that we haven't seen. I think it's the best bull riding we've ever seen since we started we had our first tour in 94, our first finals in 94. We had our first events in 93. I think it's the best bull riding we've ever seen in the PBR right now.
Wow.
And we were worried 5 years ago. We were just worried sick about this, about the bulls getting better than the guys, and all these amateurs come around and they say, well, you got to just bring easier bulls. Bring easier bulls. Well, the best guy doesn't win if you bring easier bulls. Whoever looks the prettiest on an easy bull wins. Yeah. And so our competition is a real sport, and it's real.
Yes,
so
sir.
we're never going to do that in the PBR if I ever have anything to say about it.
Yes, sir.
I talk like I keep saying we and stuff because the PBR is a big part of my life, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't have any say on it. But I think that's ingrained in the PBR because of the foundation of it is the best riders in the world against the best bulls in the world, and so that is what we always promised and delivered, and so that's how it's going to still go, even though the founders aren't there anymore.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, you've got a certain mentality, and you're probably carrying that over, at the very least, to the way you coach your team. And you're a coach of the Rattlers. So, I mean, I guess I'll start with how do you view them guys getting on practice bulls? How do you think about practice bulls?
Oh, I think when they need it, but it's a waste of time when it's got to be you've got to go at it with a purpose and a commitment. You go to practice with a purpose and a commitment. You don't get so casual that you're yapping and joking, and you take it. For me, there's lots of ways that'll work, but the way that'll work for my team and for us is we practice a couple times a month during the season when they're riding a lot of bulls every week. But we practice with a purpose, not just to get on bulls. That came along when I was a young kid. We talked about going and riding, and then somewhere about my early teenage years, I heard guys saying they're getting on bulls, and they're getting on, and it never really hit, and it didn't bother me then. But at 63 years old, when I hear my guys on my team say they're going to get on bulls, tell them anybody can get on a bull. A bull rider rides their bulls. So when we practice, we ride bulls. We don't just get on bulls.
Right.
And I want them thinking that way, and I want them reacting that way, and I want them to knowing it, that living it that way, that's what they're supposed to do. And I've been around some of the what I think are the best of all time, and I've seen all of them for the last 50 years, 60 years. I've seen all the riders and got a pretty good opinion on what I think was a really good rider and a really consistent rider and I got to travel with the best of the best and they didn't ever think they were going to get bucked off. Mm-hmm. They hardly ever got bucked off, and they didn't think they were ever going to get bucked off. And when they did get bucked off, it was if Tuff got bucked off, you followed him, you got behind him because you didn't want to be in front of him because he's going to be throwing something. He's truly mad. He would hope the bull ran over him. If Lane Frost got bucked off, he was going to drive all night. He's going to punish himself somehow. So he's going to drive all night. So when he got bucked off, you had to chuckle inside because you knew you didn't have to drive. You're gonna get that kind of yell like that, and then you get Jim Sharp. It didn't change him any because he never got bucked off. Like Jim would ride 50 in a row and he'd get bucked off one, and then he'd ride another 50 in a row. And the one that bucked him off didn't bother him that bad because he knew he's going to ride the next 50. And he just did that all the time. And so those guys that I was around, those kind of guys, and I was decent. I was pretty good, like my best year was, I feel like it was in '88. I was like, I counted how many bulls I'd been on and how many times I'd made the whistle, and I'd been on 114 bulls, and I'd made the whistle 93 times.
Golly.
And I'm going into the NFR 5th. And so, that's tough.
Yeah.
Tough. Lane, Jim, Ted Noose, those guys, especially Tuff and Jim, they didn't get bucked off.
Yeah.
And Jim, he from 96 or 86 was his rookie year to 92. Nobody made the whistle. Even Tuff didn't make the whistle as much as him.
Yeah.
But I've seen that, and so I talked about with my guys. We got you first. You got to have the right kind of guy, and then he's got to buy into the system, and he's got to trust the system. He's got to trust the process, and then you get them when you really trust the process and you really talk to them. And I've got the best bull rider going right now. One of the two best, Dalton Castle and Brady Fielder, are the best two bull riders going right now, and Brady Fielder's on my team. And Brady Fielder, I ask him every week, I say, now tell me a bull that you can't ride if you do everything right. And he knows there isn't one.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So sometimes a lot of guys, and it's cool that you mentioned that you coached the team with Trevor Brazil. Trevor had to change the way he practiced after he turned 30 years old. He had to do a lot more mental practicing than tying from the post and stuff like that. And guys, it depends on where they are in their career. I got a guy 40 years old on my team that's the toughest of all the bull riders, Joao Ricardo Vieira, and he wants to practice every day. He wants to ride bull. He loves it so much. He loves what he does so much. And he knows that he can't do it forever, and he knows that it's going to be gone at some point. But he wants to ride too many bulls. And I have to tell him, no, that's your fourth bull that you've ridden today. You got it.
Right.
But he will practice more than any of the other guys will.
Yeah.
It's because love of the game. And so practice, and you use that, use it where it works for you. And you got to find a way. You got to know the guys, and you got to know how it works for each one of them. When my son was 4 years old, my mom sent me this program called Hooked on Phonics to teach him to read. And so the first thing when I was reading the instructions on this Hooked on Phonics, it said no lesson should ever last over 15 minutes. And I thought, well, that's just like riding a colt. That's when they're getting to the good stuff, you call it a day. And that makes them want it. That makes them want it that much more.
Yeah.
So you just beat them down in the practice pen, and you can have a certain kind of results, or you can go practice with a purpose, or you can mentally practice. And all of it matters.
Yes, sir. Man, I got so many questions floating around in my head, but one that just came to mind, I'm really curious because
you're good, because that's I see why you made Derek Begay talk for 4 hours. Because you asked him about something he liked, and something he knew, and he liked.
Well, it's also something I'm super interested in.
Yeah,
and so that's how I pick guests. Is I'm really interested in that thing. But you got to see so many bull riders, and you mentioned it. There is a time limit. What's a message you would want to send to like a 19, 20-year-old kid who feels like he's going to be rodeoing forever? Because you've seen so many of them retire with maybe close to nothing, whether they had a good career or not.
That's when we started the PBR, was that we talked about this. Our guys we looked up to our whole lives that we wanted to be like. The day they retired, they had to get a job and start at the bottom because they didn't have any skills other than bull riding. Yeah. And so we built the PBR for that reason. We built the PBR so guys would hopefully have opportunities that hadn't come before. Mm-hmm. And that was always the plan. And so back to your question about advice for a 19-year-old, you've got to love it. You've got to ride. And we're having an event at Dickey's Arena, and I had Ted News come in and talk to the Rattler. So I thought it'd be a cool thing before the event that night that they'd get to meet Ted News, and I'd tell them about Ted made the NFR 14 years in a row. That's a record that will never be broken in the bull riding. Yeah. Just think about it. Wasey made them 14 times, but Ted made them 14 years in a row.
Yeah.
And the year he made his last NFR and PBR finals, he won the average at the PBR finals, at the first PBR finals.
Dang.
So, there's a legend. So I have him come in there and talk to our guys, and he's telling them about how when things get rolling and you get really focused, and he said that's when you can really ride them with love in your heart. Mm. And that hit me like, my gosh, if you ride them out of love rather than anger, fear, any other kind of emotion like that, if it's love, if it's love of the game, then that's when you can really stay focused and you're doing something right. Mm.
How did you juggle? I mean, I guess you didn't feel like it was juggling.
That's what I tell the 19-year-old. You got to love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the story.
Gotcha. You got to love it.
I remembered where I was.
Yeah. Well, now I'm thinking about you loving bull riding and bronc riding. And so how did you approach being a multi-event cowboy?
Well, I tried them all. When I was a kid, when I was growing up, we did everything, and we'd have one horse. You know, each kid would have one horse, and we damn sure found out what our horse was good at because we tried everything on him. You know, like if we found out if he was good or not. At head and heel and roping
You're a
calves,
team roper because he's good
at calves, hazing, whatever we're gonna do on him. We're gonna try them all, and we're gonna find out. You know, I'm the same way. I'm gonna try them all because I'm not very good at any of them, and I've got two brothers, an older brother and a younger brother, and they're both better than me at everything. But they never rode any saddle broncs. And then one day I was riding colt. I was riding a racehorse colt that really bucked. And my feet got to swinging a little bit, and I just got to giving it to him until he bucked me off, you know. And then I got back on it, and I thought, man, I hope he bucks again because that was really fun. Dang. And so I went at him again and then my dad had to tell me to quit trying to make him buck, you know, at some point. And I wanted to ride these broncs, and so I had some friends that had a bucking barrel, and my brother had an old bronc saddle, and I'd go take it down to my friends, John's house, and put the saddle on the bucking barrel, and we'd buck it, and I could get kind of timing. I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I got interested in it. You know? And then so there wasn't any bronc riders around where I was at in El Paso. So if there was a book or a story or anything like that, I'd read about it. And then my dad brought a guy from the racetrack that had grown up in Canada, and he'd been a bronc rider. And he came in when I was 14. I got a saddle, and he came and helped me set up my saddle a little bit. And then he told me, just stick it. I didn't have nothing to ride. I'd ride any horse, any colt. I'd strap it on whatever we could. And then like I'd go down to this feedlot, and they had one horse that bucked, and they'd put him behind a gate. They'd swing one of them big old wooden gates, and that's where I'd saddle him up, and then they'd open it up, and it wasn't any bigger than this living room, and the ground was just as hard, but that's where I'd try to go at him right there, you know, and that's when I started out. And then my dad would let me, some of the old thoroughbreds that he owned, he'd let me buck them every once in a while. But when we took them back to the track, when they're getting some time off, he'd let me buck them and flank them and see which one might buck or didn't. But when we took them back to the track, I'm the one that had to gallop them on the track all the time, just in case I taught them anything. And so that's where I learned. And I had one that really bucked. I had one old cheap claimer that really bucked, and then he'd go back and he'd win those $2,500 races.
Dang, that is wanting it. At what point in there did you cross paths with my dad and uncle?
They were pretty early. You know, I was a little younger than them, but I was going to Charlie Thompson's rodeos, and they picked up for Charlie Thompson. They fought bulls. They would be entered in the bareback riding and the bronc riding, and they'd be picking up and fighting bulls and doing whatever it took. They were around. They were young guys. I mean, they weren't a lot older than me. Your dad was probably 4 years older than me, and was Scott 2 years younger than him?
Yes, sir.
And Scott was probably 2 years older than me. Mm-hmm. But Coke was probably at a senior in college, or further in. He was the Red Raider there at Texas Tech, and he was kind of older, and Scott was entered in the college rodeos. I remember him more at my first year of college in there, but I remember your dad picking up, and your dad was more serious than your uncle was.
Yes, sir.
And I think he was more in charge of stuff for Charlie Thompson than Scott was, but they both worked. They both were real hard workers and all around guys, whatever it took, they got it done.
Yeah. My dad, he told me when I was a kid once, like just talking about rodeo, he would later, eventually, looking back, I think it was a little too late in his life, but he kind of focused more on bronc riding. But he told me later he felt like he had been a jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal, because he would, do so much. He would drive the truck and all the things for Charlie, and then, but to me, like looking at him, he just loved rodeo so much. It just was impossible for him to not do. I mean, he could even team rope. I remember going to a team roping with him when he was a kid, and he would just, catching horns and turn left, and he loved it all so much. I think it ended up being a little bit of a blessing and a curse for his rodeo career, but I guess watching him and then helping some guys get started, and even in college, like I rode all three, and I got my PRCA card fighting bulls, and I got to do all 4 events, and I was just like, I kind of got bitter towards multi-event deals, and I was like, I'm gonna focus on one thing, and anyhow, I that's what makes me ask that question about you being passionate about the two. But I think it takes a special individual like yourself, having gone 7 times in the bulls and 3 in the broncs, that to be successful in 2 events like that. To me, that's a different human, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and the great ones like Ty going in 3 events, and Stetson now, that being so Stetson. On any day, he's the best bronc rider in the world, and on any day he's the best bull rider, like that kind of stuff. That's a different level than I ever reached. I made the NFR when I was 19 in the bronc riding, and
was it you made it first in the bronc riding?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I knew what I was doing in the bull riding kind of, but I didn't have really a clue. I talked about when I started riding those broncs and stuff, and then I'd been riding for about a year, and this pro bronc rider was staying at Tuff's house, and his name was Doug Corrington, and his son wound up making the NFR, Tyler. A few years ago, but Doug was staying over there at the Hedemans, and he there was a little amateur rodeo in El Paso, and it was probably this time of the year, and I was in the bronc riding, and I was 15, 16 years old, and Doug came down there, and I'd met him, and he looked at me sitting in my saddle, and he kind of showed me a little stuff, and then he looked up under where my quarter binds go in my saddle. Well, I just had them wrapped around the stirrup leather. I didn't know where they went. And that saddle came with that strap in there, so and I'd been riding broncs for about a year like that, and he was real nice to me. He said, I think that they go like this, and he punched a hole in my stirrup leather, and he fixed them for me, and felt really good. And
you didn't know you were supposed to adjust them?
No, I didn't have a clue. I just went at them as hard as I could, and so then 3 years later, I was at Salt Lake City at the rodeo, and this is before the internet and all of this, and so about every month you'd show up to a rodeo, and they would have a stack of sports news sitting there, and that's where everybody would go grab one, and that's what you entered rodeos off of. That's what you so I saw there was a big stack of sports news there. Doug Corrington's there, entered, and I was entered, Salt Lake City. He said, man, he's looking at the sports news, and he said, it just wasn't very long ago that I helped you set up your saddle, and now you're in the top 15. And I couldn't believe it. I said, what? What are you talking about? I had to run grab one and see, and I was 11th in the standings in the bronc riding.
Dang.
You know, in July. You know, it wasn't the
That's
beginning
how
of the
you
year.
found out.
That's how I found out. I never knew I was in the top 15. And
Dang.
but I had to go to the AJRA finals, and I had to go to these AJRA rodeos, and so the next sports news, when right after the AJRA finals, I went to Abilene, Kansas, and they had one, and I was 15th. and so I didn't know how to enter, and I was going by myself, and I just went to enter, and there were some long drives and stuff like that. And I thought, and I wound up making the NFR, and I looked back on my record, and I had entered like 67 rodeos. I thought you couldn't go harder than I did, and I entered 67 rodeos, and I turned out at about 7 or 8 of them, you know. But I didn't think you could go any harder than that.
Right.
And I was riding bulls at them, but I wasn't really. I was winning a little bit. I made the circuit finals and stuff, but I wasn't getting there in the bull riding, and so I had the early success in the bronc riding, and I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it and so I started working really hard at my bull riding, and I had a lack of focus on my bronc riding, and then I didn't make the NFR again. I made it in 81, and I made it again in 90, the second time. I made it in the bull riding several times in between there, but I didn't put enough work into in those early days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasn't focused like Stetson and Ty and those guys to those guys, winning is like breathing. They got to have it. They got to have that oxygen, and and winning is that important to them.
How much do you think bronc riding has changed over the years?
Well, it's definitely evolved. The broncs are so good now, like compared to what the ones we thought were good back in.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to just like we were talking early about the guys knowing what they're breeding for and knowing what they're looking for and knowing how to take care of them. They're bigger. They're just so much better. And the bronc riding has changed. The guys are focused athletes that do it, and they're really, really good. You know, like they make rides that I know what it felt like every once in a while, but they would do that all the time.
Yes, sir.
And I do hear. I mean, there's the saddles have changed a little bit too, and the saddles they ride today, I don't know would be legal because I don't know what the rule is anymore on a saddle, and I've heard rumors about them being glued in, and the guys that I was around would never would
admit to it.
No.
They would never use it.
No, the pros wouldn't.
Right.
The pros would not. Like Clint Johnson's saddle, if you look at it today, it's as sticky as it was, and he hadn't been on a bronc in 30 years, and it's as sticky as it ever was when he rode one. He turned loose of his saddle every jump.
Right.
And there was something that there was a difference between the PRCA guys and the IPRA guys. And we thought the IPRA guys were dope smokers that were glued into their saddles. And the PRCA guys wouldn't go there.
Right. When I was a kid, I was with my dad at a AMI rodeo, and he borrowed some glycerin from a bull rider and put it on his swells. And he said, "You're allowed to use this if you're over 40. And I didn't know what he was talking about. He might have even said over 45. I don't remember, because he did get on one when he was older, a few. But I didn't realize what he meant till later. But when I was running around, as I first started getting on broncs at some of the Sankey schools that Lyle would teach, and I heard him talk about kind of a difference in bronc riders. There's saddle bronc riders, and then there's also sometimes bronc saddle riders, and they get too focused on the saddle. And I guess early when I first started, I felt like I went the opposite direction, and I just set my saddle up and then never looked at it again. And I just would always, if I bucked off or something didn't feel right, it was my fault. And eventually I got to run around with some guys that kind of like you showed me my stuff was way too tight, and I got it loosened up and my bronc riding turned around. But it seems as though these days there is such a science behind the saddle, and there's so many more bronc riders, I feel like, that the competition is so incredibly tough that not only do you have to be an athlete, but you have to have the right saddle, and you've got to have it set up correctly. And guys are getting on practice horses, and you've got to check all the boxes, I feel like, today.
If I rode today exactly like I rode when I was that age, I wouldn't win anything compared to the guys today. I can see that. I would have to get a lot better, or I wouldn't win anything at all in the bronc riding.
What was it that made you take the big break, the 9-year break?
Rock and roll denim is what Dale Brisby uses to spur his bucking bulls. I get the Reflex. Gives me the mobility I need to be the cowboy I am. So go to rockandrolldenim.com, old son.
It wasn't a break. I was in the top 20 every one of those years.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. Okay. I was in the top 20 just about. I would say if not every one of those years, most of those years.
Okay, gotcha.
But the bull riding seemed like more of an opportunity for me. It was harder for me, but it seemed like more of an opportunity, and I understood it way better than I did the bronc riding. I didn't understand the bronc riding as good at that age as I should have, and it was my fault for not learning it like that, because I was around those guys that would have helped me plenty. In '84, I went home with Clint Johnson. He was living in Sturgis, South Dakota at the time, or he was living in Spearfish, I think. And
not hardly any bronc riders around there.
He had a school. He had a school, and he was teaching, and he was telling me that I was helping him with this school, but really I was just a student. I was just watching it. I was just learning stuff, but I had never been to a bronc riding school. So I was learning this stuff, and then we left there and we went to Miles City to the bronc riding match. And I was fresh out of this school listening to Clint for 3 days, and I rode that's when I got real interested in the bronc riding again, because I felt like I had never felt on them before, because I had a purpose, and I understood what my mission was right there, and it was simple enough that I could understand it, but it was just so much better than what I'd done before. And Jim Keltz won that, and I won second. Joe Marvel won third, and that was, we went over there and got our picture taken. Keltz got this pair of, he got this rifle. I got this pair of handmade boots by Jerry Gaddis. Joe Marvel got these bronc spurs that had some silver on them or something, and we got our picture made, and I never got the picture. Dang. That was so, to me, that was a real turning point in my thought process about bronc riding, because I got to stand between Jim Keltz and Joe Marvel, and kind of on almost the winner's circle.
Did the bronc riding affect how you? It had to, on a certain level, affect how you decided who you'd travel with?
Yeah, Tuff rode broncs too. We grew up together, and he rode broncs too. He actually filled his permit in the bronc riding, and so we entered together. But then when Ty was turning 18, I ran into his dad at Albuquerque at the races, and we were talking, and he said Ty's going to turn 18, and I'd known Ty since he was 2 probably, and just heard about him. I hardly seen him ride at all, but I knew he was really, really good. And I said, I think I can help him some if he wants to. Tell him when he fills his permit to call me. He was going to go to college at Odessa College, and when he fills his permit to call me, and I'm ready to slow down. I had a young son then, and I'm ready to rodeo at a different pace than what Tuff and Lane and Jim go. And so Ty's going to work 3 events, and I'm going to work 2 events, and we can set it up for 60 to 80 rodeos, and they can go. They're going to go to.
That's you slowing down. Yeah. 60 to 80 rodeos is you taking a break
from 120.
Right. Yes, sir.
And so Ty filled his permit. He went to this first rodeo on his permit, and I said, well, when you fill your permit, he went to Brawley, California. He went to somewhere like in Ohio, and he won one event, and he had to win 2,500 in those days. And so he won one event and placed in another, and then he was entered in Brawley in 3 events, and so he called and Brawley was going to be over on Saturday, and Odessa books were open on Monday, and he had to get his card to get entered in Odessa or to Kansas City. One of the whatever it was going to be the first rodeo, and it was one of those 2. And so he called the office, and they laughed at him. He told them that he wanted to go ahead and pay his dues, so they would process his card as soon as he got through this weekend at Brawley. Mm-hmm. And they looked, and told him he had to win. You got to win another $1,400 or something like that. And he said, yeah. And so they didn't think it sounded like he went to maybe 2 rodeos on his permit or 3, and got it done. And so we started entering then, and then we would enter the same, like we'd still travel together. And Clint Bronger kind of took my spot in there in that rig, and me and Ty, but we'd enter the same rodeos. Ty and I just enter a lot less rodeos, because a lot of the bronc riding and bareback riding then was 2 head when the bull riding was 1 head. And so we'd spend all the time we needed at one rodeo.
Yeah. You'd get on 4 horses and a bull in one night? Or make it 2 days?
No, very rare was it back-to-back 2 head like that.
Right.
But occasionally it was. But usually it would be 2 days. We'd have to spend 2 days or might be a day in between, and so we just slowed our pace down to our travel pace, not the riding pace.
Yes, sir.
And then that's why, it's hard to compare Ty with anyone else, because if you watch the NFR at the 7th, 8th, 9th round, the bareback riders are pretty sore, and those guys are fit and strong and tough, and lots of them can barely walk out of the arena.
Yes, sir.
In them later rounds, Ty was sprinting out of that arena because he had to saddle his bronc and then go ride him, and then sprint out of the arena to go ride his bull. And so the physical toughness, besides the competitive commitment that it took I didn't understand it. I thought I was teaching him as we're going, and I didn't understand that kind of commitment.
Right.
I can see it now. I never was there. I could never make myself go there where it was that important to me. Like my path was totally different. Than we were together, but my path was different. Mine was, I've been married 43 years, and I've got a different kind of goal. And I was married with a young son, and I was homesick all 100% of the time. And I admired and appreciated so much what those champions did, but I could never get myself to think that way. I wanted to make a living for my family, and that was good enough.
Yeah. How much did what happened to Lane have to do with you inventing the riding vest?
Well, that's the story everyone tells, like that I did that after Lane got killed. Well, about 2-3 years after Lane got,
a little bit of time.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years after Lane got killed. That was 89. About 91, my mom called me, and my younger brother Casey's was a jockey at that time, and she's telling me about these flak jackets that lots of racetracks are requiring, lots of states are requiring them to wear. And she said, I wish you'd get one of those to ride bulls in. She'd say that over and over, and kind of pestered me about it. And I didn't really want to talk about it. And so I was reading on Sports Illustrated, I think it was one of the magazines, when I was on a plane going somewhere, and it was about this jockey, Julie Crone, that she was the top female jockey, one of the legends, and they said in a spiel that she was in that flak jacket saved her life, that this big 1,400-pound thoroughbred stepped right in her chest, and that the doctors thought that saved her life. And so it got me thinking a little more about it. My mom's still telling me about it, and I said, okay, well, let me know who they are and stuff. Well, I didn't get back to the company, so there was a company in Ontario called Tipperary that made the vest for the hunter jumpers and the jockeys and stuff like that. She must have looked at the tag in Casey's and his stuff, and so she contacted them. They called me, and so I said, well, I'd be interested, and we'd start doing something if the design was okay. But if it caused me to get bucked off one time, I'm never going to wear it. If I can tell I got it on, I'm never going to wear it. So then they sent me had me measure myself, and they sent me some prototypes, and it was all the stuff that they used on the jockeys and the hunter jumpers, and had to get undressed to put it on, and you had to do all of this, and so I changed the design, and I said, I've got to get it where I can put it on right before I ride and take it off right after. I want it to look Western. I want the Velcro over the shoulders. That way, if I'm knocked out, they can take it off of me laying right there, or if a bull gets a horn under it. And then we went on. They had all the technology that would protect you and stuff. And we went on, and I got it where I couldn't tell I had it on, so I went ahead and rode with it. And I rode with it, and I could get along fine, and it looked fine. And it's that vest right there is the first one in that picture right there.
Dang.
Is the first. That's that year. And so about the 7th round, I had this bull called Bojangles of David Bailey's, and he's just kind of spun pretty nice, and he's going away from my hand, and right when I went to get off, he just turned back and he caught me, and then and he kind of worked me over a little bit, and it felt like somebody slapped me in the chest. That was the first time that I'd really tested it out. And I got to the locker room, and Ted Noose and Cody Custer was standing. I already had Ty one ordered, and those guys are saying, "Can you get me one of those?"
Dang.
And that's kind of where it started out. But
And wasn't it the next NFR that
14 had it the next year, and then after that, everybody's had them. But
had there been a lot of other deaths outside of lanes?
No,
that we don't really know about, or
there had been some, but some of them were, they were head injuries, and some over the years, if you go way back to Pete Knight in the bronc riding at Hayward, California in the 1930s, got stepped on in 30s or 40s, got stepped on and killed him. And there's been that kind of stuff, but whether it was Lane getting killed or just the horse racing had gotten where that became a rule, and my mom telling me about it like that, that was always in the back of my mind, was about Lane and what would have happened if he'd had one of these on, that kind of thing. But it wasn't like I set out to make the vest after he got killed.
Yes, sir.
I got to thinking, like, my mom was really more responsible than I was.
Yes, sir.
And
so maybe it influenced her a little bit.
So, yeah, it could have. And I got thinking, well, if I don't have to try to ride with broken ribs, because this is how I feed my family. If I don't have to ride as sore, I might do a better job. I might just do a little bit better if I'm not sore in the rib cage or something like that. I was thinking that way.
Yes, sir.
I know how dangerous the sport is, and I totally accepted that you can die doing this. I understood that. No one didn't want to. But I was thinking the day-to-day stuff.
How did your mind? What about? I hate to use the word evolution, but the helmet, how it started getting integrated. How did you view that?
Well, I was selling the vest at the time, and the guys started asking about these helmets, and I said, I don't know anything about that, and I'm not going to touch it, because I wouldn't have wore the vest if I felt like it would have ever made me get bucked off one bull. I just wouldn't have wore it. And the weight of the helmet and stuff like that, I thought, if I'm trying not, if the vest, if it hindered me in any way, if I'm trying not to break my ribs and I get bucked off because of it, I might break my neck. So I'm not gonna. That's
a good point.
The helmet or any of that. I'm not against it, but I don't have a strong opinion on it like that. Like in the PBR, there was a lot of push to make it a rule, and it's a rule now. And I was part of the PBR. I was a part of that, and I couldn't argue. I can't argue one way or the other.
Yes,
I've
sir.
seen more guys. I've seen just as many concussions and more broken necks since the helmets have been around. But the bulls are way better, and the guys are getting on. The guys in the PBR are getting on a rank one Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then another one, a even ranker one than that in the short go on Sunday. They're I don't know. I just say this goes back to the 19-year-old that you asked me a long time ago. The advice: you gotta love it, because you can die doing this. This is very dangerous, and it's real.
Yes, sir.
And the injuries are real. And if you don't love it, there's nothing more stupid you can be doing than riding bulls.
Right.
But if you love it, it's the greatest job you're ever going to have.
Yeah, I guess Yeah, I've got two questions. I'm trying to figure out which one to ask first, but I don't know. When guys come to my arena, we'll start guys out and interns come in and want to ride bulls, and it's pretty much a non-negotiable if somebody's starting. But then, the other day I went to JB's and Kai's getting on. He got on 3 buckers in the practice pen. And I have the utmost respect.
Did he ride any of them?
Yeah. Just barely.
Because anyone can get on.
No, he rode all 3 of them.
Okay, he's a bull rider.
Very handily. He is no doubt a bull rider. But, man, I just have so much respect seeing him pull his hat down and ride without a helmet. I don't know. It's just this coolness to it for me as a cowboy.
I was working cows one day, and this guy said, I don't watch much of that bull riding anymore. Since you guys started wearing helmets, it just took something out of it for me. And I thought, well, I don't ride them either, and I didn't have a helmet, but I don't care.
Right.
Like that. Like, do you like football? They all got a helmet. And if somebody's helmet falls off during a play, you think, holy shit, that guy's going to get hurt. And then if somebody doesn't, if their helmet never falls off their whole career, they have brain damage at the end of it anyway.
That's a really good point.
So I was like, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And you're going to pay a price. You're going to pay a price, and nobody wants to have it alter their life after rodeo.
Yes, sir.
But if you play a really tough contact sport, the chances are you're going to have something lingering from there. And the helmet, if that saves them, that's great. I'm all for it if it saves them. But I don't know whether it does or it doesn't.
Yes, sir.
I don't. And I'm not a scientist, and I'm not qualified to do the study, and I know that I probably don't have the number of concussions that I experienced in my life. I've probably got some side effects there like that, but that was a choice, and that's a choice that guys got to understand. Back to the 19-year-old about riding. Sure, wear all the safety equipment that you feel is necessary, whatever the rules are too. But if you don't love it, don't do it.
Is there a point where you see someone, and what advice do you give the guy who you observe truly loves it? Like, let's say that you think that this guy truly loves it, but fear starts creeping in. Maybe they've had an injury. Maybe their traveling partner did, for whatever reason.
It becomes a choice. First, it's a choice on fear as far as this, on self-preservation and stuff. First, it's a choice to block something out and to go get the job done, whatever it takes. And you've got to understand yourself. What's it going to take for me to get where I try it as hard as I used to? And you've got to figure it out, and it's different for every guy. But if you allow that to continue, that becomes your reaction. And when that becomes your self-preservation becomes your reaction, the old timers used to say his powder got damp. And when your powder gets damp, you're not going to be able to fire. And so you've got to surround yourself with the right situation and the right kind of people, and decide if this is what you really want to do. Because if you're saving yourself all the time, you're not going to be committed to winning.
So we're at your arena. You've got a little spot where guys can come and stay, and is it Jess Lockwood and Kai Hamilton? or some of the recent guys that have stayed here?
They stayed here. Brady Fielder, Brady Olison. We've had some really, really good bull riders that have stayed here, and went on and done a lot of stuff.
What kind of? I guess I'm in a roundabout way. I'm curious what you would tell a young guy. Like, I get a lot of people that reach out to me, being on the internet. Like, how do I get started bull riding? How do I get started cowboying, et cetera? And so that is one question I like to ask is, like, what advice do you give to 18, 20-year-old kid who's wanting to get started riding bulls, and what that looks like if they were in your camp?
You gotta love it, and you gotta be dedicated, and there's a book I was reading not long ago about these two guys fishing, and one of them's a Hall of Fame fisherman, and one of them's a pretty good fisherman. The guy in the back of the boat's a pretty good fisherman, and this guy on the front is a legendary bass tournament fisherman, and he's catching one nearly every cast, and the guy on the back catches a couple fish, and then they stop for lunch and they talk for a little bit, and the guy in the front the pro Hall of Famer has never said a word the whole time, and so the other guy, out of respect for the guy he's looking up to, he doesn't say anything either. So then they get having lunch, and the fisherman, the real fisherman, says, "Hey, I hear you back there fishing. I can tell you know what you're doing. You're a good fisherman." And he says, "Well, how come I've only caught 2 and you've caught 10 or 11? And he said, "Well, why do you think?" And the guy in the back said, "Well, it might be the color of my lure. I might need to change. It might be my rhythm or my speed or something. I might just not." And he went through 4, 5, 6 reasons, and he doesn't really know. And he said, "Well, what do you think it is?" He said, "Well, where we're fishing, the fish are interested. They're interested. But your job as a fisherman is to get them to commit. And the bull riders aren't that much different than the fish, except the size of their brain." I don't know which. I'm not gonna insult the fish, but there's a difference in being interested and being committed, and there's a difference for this 18-year-old kid is going to find a way to get it done. There's a different path for all of us. There's a different path that's going to get him there. But you look at it and you think, wow, that guy, he gets to hang out with all the champions. No wonder he's so good. All he's around is really good riders. Say Kai Hamilton.
Right.
All he's around, he rodeos Stetson Wright.
Yeah.
He hangs out with J.B. Mooney. He's always around. Well, it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
When he got to the point where he could rodeo, he would have starved to death if he wasn't ready, and he started trying to rodeo with Stetson Wright.
Right.
Like that. He had to win his way up to that point. He had to win. When he was living here, he had a PRCA card, but he wasn't ready. And he wanted to go to the PBR, but he wasn't ready. So we went to the CPRA rodeos and got a couple of them under his belt and started winning and made the finals in that deal, and then started going to the next. And then he's at the NFR the next year. Yeah. And then he gets to rodeoing with Stetson because they're going to the same places, because they're going to the big rodeos. And I look back at my life and the guys I was around. Well, I wouldn't have been around those guys if I couldn't win enough to stay around those guys. So that happens kind of organically, that you're sitting there and you look around and all the only guys there are real pros. The only guys there are, you know, like my first NFR, that's Brad Jermanson, Bobby Brown, Tom Miller, Monty Henson, Bud Pauley, Clint Johnson, Rick Smith, David Botham, Bobby Berger,
Dang.
Mel Coleman, Bud Monroe, Gerald Brune, Wilf Highland, Butch Knowles, besides me. Those guys, well, you look around, those are the only guys there.
Right.
Because you want enough that you have to hang out with those guys.
Yeah.
What's your dream? It's a dream come true for a 19-year-old kid, but 6 months before that, I wasn't hanging out with those guys, or 12 months before that, I was hanging out with the college rodeo guys, and you got to go. You've got to go, and when it's time to step up, you got to step up.
What did you kind of get a glimpse of what Kai has, you know, now that he's, I mean, is there a side of you that's not surprised seeing what he's accomplished?
No, I'm not surprised. Troy Dunn called me and told me there's a great kid that's come over here and he's going to Odessa College, or maybe he was in Odessa College at that time. And
where all the Australians go.
He's needing a place to stay. Got any room? You know, that kind of thing. And I said, sure, tell him to come up here. Well, he comes up in a little van, got his just packed, and unloads and stays here. The funny thing was he's entered in some PRCA rodeos that first year. He's 19. And I had to fly to Albuquerque. It was just this time of the year. I had to fly to Albuquerque to the PBR. And I never heard from him again. And I thought, well, he left his stuff there. He left it. And he's not answering his phone, and he's not. Well, he'd gone down to Killeen and broke his jaw, and he was in the hospital and had surgery and was stuck there.
Dang.
And didn't have his phone. Whoever helped him, he didn't have his.
Yeah.
So I didn't hear. I thought, well, he went to Mineral Wells and he sent me the video of his ride, and then I never heard from him again. And so then I get back here and I got a message from him that he's down there in the hospital.
Dang. Yeah.
And it was
dang, Aussies can't keep up with their phones.
But he wasn't ready. He was gonna be. He was committed. And he's gonna definitely do the work.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to get better at riding, because at the end of the day, it comes down to your riding.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, you can be committed to the gym. You can be committed to taking care of your body, to eating right, to doing all the work, to entering the right place, to everything like that. But if you're not committed to making the whistle, none of it matters. You can be committed to your social media stuff or whatever, anything like that. But if you're not committed to making the whistle,
yeah,
all of that, you're not really a bull rider.
So, I mean, this is what you're saying now is kind of a thought I had earlier when you were talking about that CEO that kind of gave you a comment that convicted you in that conversation with Ty earlier in the podcast. You were talking about like how much had you helped them, and I understand what you're saying, and I love that you take responsibility. Is there a side of you though that, I mean, there's so much about bull riding where, like you're talking about being committed to making the whistle, that you can set a guy up, but at the end of the day, like that part you can't really teach, right?
Well, it's riding. You can't ride them for them, but you can. It's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm.
And it never will be. It's riding. So if you make the whistle, you did something right.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't make a difference if you push, pull, squeeze, lift, dig in, set down, get up. If you get him rode, you got him rode.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might get better at it if you understand the fundamentals and you understand the place that you want to be. But guys that try to tell you the newest gimmick or the newest way of doing it, or how you point something one way and move over here to get over there to the, are really trying to confuse you so you'll go to their school more than once. Mm-hmm. And it's just silly.
Well,
you make the whistle, and you get it. Ted Noose told me a kid was riding his first bull, and he said, I told this kid, no, you only think about one thing. You only think about one thing. You only think, and Ted and me were walking as we're talking, and I'm thinking, what's that one thing he's going to tell me? What is that? He says, anything about that one thing. And I'm thinking, I hope it's good. And and he says, right before you only think about one thing, stay on him. And it sounds funny and everything, but that's exactly what he needed to think about.
Right.
And then he's going to learn better. He's going to learn as he goes, but there's only so much information he can absorb when he's scared and he's fired up and he's excited and he's ready and he doesn't know how. But figure out a way to stay on, then you'll get better.
I don't know if this is private information or not. If it is, I can take this part out of the podcast. But the last time I saw you,
I didn't sign anything.
Well, the last time I saw you in person was at Billy Bob's, and it was a sponsor. I was there for a sponsor deal, but there was a bunch of people, teachers of bull riding, and y'all were essentially having a meeting, and it seemed as though you're trying to get everybody on the same page. Is that something that the PBR is interested in, or I guess it is with that kind of meeting, like
developmental stuff? Because PBR always gets requests for what you're asking, the same thing you're asking. Where do I learn to ride bulls? How do I become a bull rider? How do I do this? And we want, as the PBR and all the coaches of all the teams, we wanted to be able to send them to somebody. We're coaching, like I coach the Rattlers, and that's my full-time job. That's not what I do on Wednesdays, and then I hang out the rest of the time, and I coach the Rattlers. And if I don't have the team over here, I'm working on what I'm going to tell the team when they are over here. Mm-hmm. And then we're going places. So I've got to have somebody that I can trust that's on the same page as me if I want to send one of my pros or a beginner to them. Mm-hmm. Because the fundamentals of bull riding don't change. They haven't changed since Jim Shoulder's days, and they won't change 100 years from now. It's the bull's trying to get out from under you, and you're trying to stay on him. So
are there people out there that you feel like do kind of teach too much gimmick stuff that's not a actual fundamental? And I'm not trying to call anybody out. I don't want to.
Like here. So there's guys that have been teaching bull riding for years and years and years. So if somebody's teaching bull riding and they think you should go to more than one school, then they're full of shit.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because you tell them, this is the middle, this is balanced. No, go figure out how to stay there. That reminds me, the bronc riders up there, mm-hmm. One of the guys that helped me the most back in those days, and to this day, still a real good friend, and we talk, and is Rick Smith. And Rick Smith was a great NFR bronc rider, a great bronc rider. His brother Bill is one of the legends of all time, mm-hmm. one of the greatest world champions of all time. Well, Bill's probably about 10 years older than Rick. So when Rick was in high school, Bill had won his first championship, and he got Rick a bronc saddle. Got him a Severe, a really good, brand new Severe. And Rick rode that saddle for a little while, and he went to college. And then he went to college. And somebody at the college, one of these experts at the college, told him that as long as his legs are, he needs a longer seat in his saddle. And so Rick was talking to Bill, and Bill said, "Well, that's your saddle. Why don't you learn to ride it?" And Rick rode it his entire career.
Yeah.
A 15 3/4 inch saddle. Rick's 6 foot tall.
Dang.
Went to about 10 NFRs.
That, golly, I think I want to say, I know, Ryder Wright's maybe even upwards of his first or second world title was under 16 inches, his saddle, because he had been riding it for so long.
Yeah, they ride a little longer saddle now, but what I'm getting at is in those days, before social media and everything, you learn to ride with what you got. You learn to ride. You learn to make it work. You learn whatever tool you have. People built houses without having special tools,
right?
And they learn to make it work. And if you do things that work one time, then you try to duplicate that and make it work again. That's what I telling. Brings me to another good story. If you still want,
absolutely,
you still got time.
Yeah.
So in 1982, the beginning of the year, I made the NFR in 81. 1982, Bobby Brown was a legendary bronc rider. Was runner-up for the world in 81, and him and Monty Henson rodeoed together. And we're at El Paso Rodeo. I was at El Paso paying my entry fees, and Bobby Brown said, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And I knew him because that's the guys I'd been around, because I'd gotten to that level where I got to go to the same rodeos that those guys were going. And Bobby Brown wants to talk to me, and I was really excited about just talking to him. And he said, "I was wondering if you might want to rodeo with me this summer." And this is 1982. And El Paso, February 1982. And I said, "Yeah, of course I want to rodeo with you." But you could only buddy two guys then. And he'd been rodeoing with Hawkeye for years. And he asked me to rodeo with him. And I didn't know what happened between them. And he said, "I haven't told Monty yet, but I'm just thinking that I'll just go with you. I like the way you try." And he flew his own airplane and everything like that. Well, that was that same week that we were talking. A few days before that, me and my wife had gotten together. We started going out, and this was in February. Well, we got married in May, and I told him I was committed to the college rodeos, and I couldn't go take off till after the college finals. And so me and Leanne got married and go to the college finals. And then the week after that, I'm heading out with Bobby Brown. We start out in Reno, and then we go to Greeley, and then we went to we're in his airplane, and he tells me, "Wow, you're 20." He asked me, how old are you? And I said, "I'm 20." He said, "Just got married." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I remember when I was 20. I was between my second and third marriage." And I said, "Really? How many times have you been married?" And this is way back. He said, 4. If I lose one more, I might start thinking it's something I'm doing. And so I tell these bull riders that when they want to change bull ropes all the time, like they ride really good one year and the next year they show up with total different kind of equipment. And I thought, hey, wait a minute. At some point, it might be something you're doing that's not working there.
I got another topic I want to bring up, but on that, are you? Does it matter to you, American or Brazilian bull rope? Do you have a preference? Watching them guys?
I never rode with a Brazilian rope. No, I don't care. See, like, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it.
Well, I'm sorry for bringing it up.
Like from them guys.
Yeah.
Here's what they were talking. I was watching a football game, and the commentator was saying that the ground's almost frozen, and they need different kind of spikes on their different kind of cleats, and they need a different length, and this team's wearing this kind, and they said Bill Belichick told them, just get some shoes that work, and let's go. So I want to score. So if you think the magic rope's going to do it for you, go ahead. But when you don't get a score, don't be blaming it on that rope, because So the American rope, I liked the idea of, I understand the American rope. I understand. I put it in the same spot every single time, and right where I pull it, that's where it is when the whistle blows, unless I didn't pull it tight enough. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. And I know what side I want to get off of, and the bullfighters should know what side I want to get off of. All of that. But I don't care what it's not my rope. And so that's a personal thing. Use whatever you like. But don't go get a Brazilian rope and then tell me your hand's sore. I don't want to hear that stuff because it squeezes all of them. All of them got a sore hand.
Yes,
sure,
sir.
it squeezes all their hands. So don't be telling me you got a sore hand.
Yeah.
Because you made that choice there.
Yeah.
And then I've heard guys say, well, you won't hang up with it. And then they've got to put so much glue on it to keep their hand in it that they hang up anyway into their hand. So I don't care as long as they get a score.
Yeah.
But I understand the fundamentals of the American rope. I understand it better than I do the Brazilian rope.
Yes, sir. Well, one thing you've had a front row seat to as a competitor and also running things in the arena at the PBR is bullfighting. And it's hard not to ask the one question of just how bullfighting has evolved, because you've gotten to see so many generations of it.
I hope you're enjoying a ranch fuel as you're listening to this episode of Rodeo Time. Use code DALE on ranchfuel.com for 15% off, old son. Drink up and use code DALE on ranchfuel.com.
It's like the bronc riding. It's like it's gotten so good. It's gotten so good, and there's more than a couple of guys that do it. But the PBR had a lot to do with it. For one thing, it was on television. For another thing, we always tried to get the best bullfighters. We always took the bullfighters that the guys wanted as riders everywhere we went. So the best guys were there. And at some point, the chemistry between the guys got to the point where there was no ego in it. It doesn't matter if I save him or you save him or he saves him. And we don't got to get hooked to get a bunch of attention. But if it's necessary to save them, that's necessary to save them. And then they started this triangle thing. They started talking about it. Maybe it's been around longer. They started using 3, though. When I was young, they used 1 or 2.
Right.
And so when we started the PBR, we were using 2 instead of 3. As we started using 3 and they started talking about this triangle thing, I don't know who invented it, and I don't care. It's just really, really good. They've got a plan, a really good plan, and they understand what their goal is. And then we've got Frank Newsom watching them, and Frank watches all of them, and he'd give you anything he's got. He's not holding back information so you'll come to another school. And he's not trying to trick you into something that doesn't work so you'll come to another school. He's giving you everything he's got every time. And so the bullfighters learned. So, and there were great bullfighters before Frank. There were, and that's something that I got. I rode the last bull that Wickpath fought. You know, like I've been around a lot of bullfighters.
Dang.
So I've been around a lot of bullfighters over the years. I lived right next door to Rob Smets for a while. We were in Merkel. We were, and we're good friends. And I've known a lot of great bullfighters. And I've seen them.
I was at my first got on Bronx, I think. But anyway, I was at a Sankey school down in New Caney, Texas, and every time they turned a bull out, this one guy would go out there and bait him in, and every now and then step around him. And I was like, man, who is that? Had a cap on, and anyhow, Crabtree.
Yeah.
That fought bulls in PBR for so long. I didn't even realize it till the end of the school who it was. But I don't know what made me just think of him other than the fact that you knew him.
Yeah. Crabtree and Rob used to butt heads on a weekly basis. They fought bulls. But they didn't like each other. And they fought bulls together. And one of them would be mad at the other on a daily. And finally in Laughlin one night, I thought we were going to have to fire both of them because they were all over each other. And then they wound up and this is when I had something to do with the PBR, and I was really representing the PBR at that time, and I had to get them to leave the arena, and I had to talk to them, and I said, both of you can go home right now, if you're not going to get along. And for some reason, they listened so well because they got along and they became great friends. They loved each other, and maybe they went back there and fought. I don't know, but they worked it out, and they worked it out, and they got along great. And I know Rob's so glad that they did because we lost Crabtree the next year.
Yes, sir.
And it was really kind of a blessing that they got it worked out before then.
What I was fighting bulls at a deal, and one of those bullfighters that fights at the PBRs, he was there, and I was like, I think I told him, I think I faded out there too much, and that bull came to me a little during the ride, and he said, bring him to town broke. And it was crazy to me just thinking about the difference in bulls that he was used to and what the stock contractors usually put in front of him. How much of a factor did that play when those bulls are bucking, those bullfighters that, if a bull got distracted? I guess it depended on the bull.
It's really tough. It's really tough because it still happens every now and then, but it's rare, But some of the bulls are meaner than the other ones, and those guys don't have time to come from the other side of the arena, so they inch in there as it's going, and especially the better the ride is going, the more they're going to inch in there because the more time they have, the more he's still on the bull.
Yes, sir.
And so they've got to be close. They're really good. They're just bullfighting's in a great place. Bullfighting's in a really, really good place where they know what they're doing and they know what they want to do. But there's been good bullfighters way before that.
Yes, sir.
And the fundamentals of bullfighting don't change either. You don't let the guy get hooked. You distract the bull from the guy that just hit the ground.
It's impressive to me. I really, I guess, appreciate the aggressiveness of a bullfighter when, for instance, maybe Cody Webster like goes 2-1 afterwards?
He loves it. He loves it. Like that's how you want the bull riders to love riding. That's how, if you're a bronc rider, that's how you want to love it. If you're a bareback rider, a steer wrestler, a calf roper, if you love it like that, that goes back to Ted Noose telling you do it with love in your heart.
Is there ever a time where the stock contractors just really do get mad about that? About the bullfighters maybe going to them too much or making too many rounds afterwards?
I never heard that. You know, I go back to Jim Shoulders when they bucked a bull. He didn't open the let-out gate until they fought him. You fight him, and then when one of them bucked good and fought good, that became the best bull. And that 189 Double Trouble would hit the barrel. He'd fight. You'd be 90 points on him if you could ride him. He'd hit the barrel. He'd fight, and then leave the arena. And that was in the late 70s, early 80s. All through the 80s. He lasted 10 years and did that. Usually they quit one or the other. Nowadays, they don't even attempt to fight the good bucking bulls. So it's a different time, but I've never, the pro-level stock contractors, they know those bullfighters are pro-level bullfighters, and they got a job to do too. And I haven't heard that.
Yes, sir. You know? And well, I guess I remember there was one in FR. We were watching it, and I want to say maybe, I know it was Webb and Tuck, and then I think Chuck Swisher was there. And so that, I mean, it would have been several years ago, but they, you can hear faintly people on the back of the chutes. The bull rider gets bucked off, and they're out there, and you hear somebody yell like, "All right, get out of there!" And somebody's like, you know, essentially, I don't know who it was because there's so many stock contractors there, but somebody's like, "Get out of there!" And I appreciated, having fought just a couple of bulls before, their aggressiveness, and I always just kind of assumed, or I just kind of guessed that maybe that was the case at the PBRs with the level of bull power that was there, and you know, some of these bulls being so expensive. I just kind of assumed maybe that was a little bit of a thing sometimes, but maybe it's not.
I think it's more the production.
Gotcha.
Like at the NFR, they're so caught up in making it last 2 hours.
Right, that could have been what it was. Get him out of the arena.
That might have been a production guy that.
Yes, sir.
Wanted to buck another bull right now.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't hear that out of those guys, because the bulls that, and I heard Neil Gay say this, he'll either quit one or the other. When one of those bulls really bucked and really fought, he's going to quit one or the other. Dang. And because they fought him. And so if he's focused on bucking, he's probably not going to be a good fighting bull. And if he's focused on hooking somebody, he's probably not going to be a good bucking bull. And I heard him say that, and then that's why I thought about 189 of Jim Shoulders was such a great, he's a legend. He's just a really good draw. You know, like he's one you'd win first on, but he got rode a few times. But he's in FR 10th round bull, but he was one of the nicer ones in that round, you know. But he fought every time, every single time.
It seems like ever since you guys founded the PBR, there have been so many people try to replicate creating something outside of the PRCA. What is it that you guys have done so well and differently that has made it be one of the only things as successful or more successful than pro rodeo?
When we started, it was about sticking together. We was the best guys in the world. We knew it, and so we could say it. It's not overhyping anything, saying the best guys on the best bulls. And we've continued all these years later. The recipe is that simple. It's the very best guys and the very best bulls. And it's not something that there's only one place where the very best guys and the very best bulls are. There's plenty of good bulls at the rodeos, and there's plenty of good guys, but the very best guys are riding on the biggest stage for the most money. Mm-hmm. Like, they make a big deal out of Houston is it's the biggest rodeo. Mm-hmm. Paid $65,000 this year. Golly. To win it. Mm-hmm. Other than that, Calgary's next, and it paid $50,000 to win it. Mm-hmm. The PBR pays $50,000 every week of the year. Yeah. It pays $50,000 to win it every week.
Yeah.
So if you tell me if you ride bulls for a living, if that's what you do, you ride bulls for a living, and you're capable of riding the PBR level bulls, would you be going for $50,000 every week, or $50,000 2 weeks out of the year, and a couple 10,000 payoffs and a couple 5,000, and those sort of things? The money is great in rodeo, but it's way better in the PBR. And then the winner gets $1 million bonus on top of that. The go-rounds at the PBR finals are going to pay $75,000 this year. The average pays $350,000.
Golly.
And then you win the championship, you get $1 million on top of all of that. There's money out there in that thing.
Yeah. How do you feel like the teams is going to help the sport of bull riding?
That's where I think is really taken off. It's now we come to this. It's who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
It's who you surround yourself with in whatever you do. You surround yourself with greatness. Then in bull riding, in rodeo, you surround yourself with the best guys. Well, you're one of the best guys, because you can't get entered if you're not one of the best guys, and then you're going to starve to death because you can't win nothing because only the best guys are there. So to survive, you've got to win. Mm-hmm. And to win at that level, there's only one place for you to go, and it's the top level. Mm-hmm. And so teams surrounds these guys with like-minded, hardworking guys, and with a common goal. And so that really helps them. And then coaching does help them. And I love this job. But I love this job, and the Texas Rattlers hired me to be the coach. Mm-hmm. But God gave me the authority to coach this team. And the authority and the ability to coach this team. And these guys being together make each other stronger and make each other better, and they hold each other accountable, because besides all the money that I'm telling you that you can win in the PBR, if our team wins, your daughter might get to go to a better college. It matters. You might be able to build a nicer house for your wife. Yeah. You might be able to retire and not have to get a job. Mm-hmm. If I do my job and help our team win, it's going to help you, and it's going to help you, and it's going to help you. And so there's a little more accountability there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're riding bulls. The better we do, the more money we make. There's also some guaranteed money and stuff like that in it for them. But if I do my job better, not only will I be a better example for the rest of the guys on my team, and for the other guys that aren't on my team, and for my grandkids or whoever it is, if you do a better job, then everything about it gets better, for not just for you. It's not just about you anymore as a bull rider. You're on your own riding, but we're all in this together too at the same time. And the teams, that's 3 years into teams. Last year it started showing up a little bit. And this year it's really showed up that the bull riders have caught up with the bulls. Mm. For the last 20 years, they're saying, we're going to have to breed some more bull riders. We're going to have to get some better bull riders. These breeding programs we're going to have to
Caldell Brisby.
We're going to have to get, well, I was thinking more Ronnie Kitchens. We're going to have to get Donnie Gay.
To crack back out?
No, just to go breed the bull riders' moms.
Oh, jeez. I've been trying to get Ronnie Kitchens to come on to the podcast, but
I haven't seen him.
And Monty Henson. That's another name you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I don't have either one of their numbers. I have a number, but I call them in it. But who else should I have on? Mm-hmm. Some of these names that have come up that you.
They're all good.
I got to have Jim Sharp.
You got to have Jim. Jim doesn't talk too much, but there's a lot there. See, Jim was really, if he only rode bulls for professionally for 7 years, there'd be no debate about who's the best there ever was. Mm. But he rode for 17 years, and with some injuries that he had, he was still really good for the last 10 years, but he was just human. The first 7 years, nobody was even close. Like, nobody was that good. I can't say they weren't even close because Lane won the world once in there. Tuff won the world twice or actually 3 times there during Jim's, and he won it in the PBR too. So I can't say that Tuff wasn't in that league, but Jim was so good that, like, he would ride 50 in a race, and that's something you should do when you go, is get him to show you the records. He's got perfect records of everything he got on everywhere. Dang. It was a little jackpot in Potosi, Texas. It's there.
Yes, sir.
And
was he? I don't know what I expected when I met him, and like Cole said earlier, we got to work cows with him, and he's stopped by the house a couple of times. And was he always that nice of a guy? Like, yeah, so kind.
He's always that humble. He's always been. He's always been that way. But he never said much, and he could ride everything. And we didn't, like, when somebody can really ride, you don't try to mess with them. You just tell them, you pat him on the back and keep it going. You keep you don't try to teach him how to ride when what he's doing is working. Mm-hmm. Well, Jim had a regular rope. Jim Watkins made his rope. Jim had a regular rope, very little rosin on it, just nothing, no pad, nothing, just took his wrap, just regular, just slid up there and went, and then they couldn't buck him off, and he could ride everything. Mm. And so thought, well, he knows enough to do what he's doing, but he never talked about it. So we got to the point that we weren't sure. He's just a kid when he got in with us. And so we're at the point where Lane and I talk about bull riding a lot. And we're talking about bull riding, and Jim never says a word ever. Tuff's in there and talks about bull riding. Jim never says a word ever. So we get to Reno, and Lane's in the short go. He's got this bull 17. Which way did he go was the bull's name. And he'd buck Tuff off, and he'd buck me off, and he'd buck Lane off before, and he's built like a buffalo, straight uphill, and he weighed 2,200 pounds, and he'd run out of the chute and then just crack him some which way, and was just terrible. And you didn't want him. Lane had him in the short go at Reno, and he's all over him. He's on at the end of his arm, jerked down, back up, into his hand, back up, away from his hand, and then gets slammed right on his head at 7 seconds. And Lane's mad, so he's driving, of course, and he's mad. Wherever we were going, maybe Pinoca, a long drive from Reno. And he's mad, and it's like daylight the next morning. He's still driving. And I got up and got me some coffee and asked him if he wanted me to drive. And I didn't offer to drive very often because I knew he was going to say no, so that's why I offered. He says, no. And he said, do you know? And Lane didn't want, he didn't just cuss all the time, but he said, you know what that stupid said? I said, what? Jim? He said, yeah. He said, I asked him what it looked like on that bull. And he said, looked like you just let go. Jim figured it. He figured if you got on a bull, you're supposed to ride him, and if you didn't, you must have let go. If you didn't ride him, and so Lane said, "That's the last time I'm ever talking to him about bull riding." And Jim wasn't trying to be rude about it. He just thought, that's so. I thought all these years, I thought that Jim didn't really know much about bull riding and didn't care. He just did it. And so I had him come up here because I wanted him to meet the Rattlers one day at one of our practice sessions. And he comes up here and we're talking. And I said, Jim, what'd you think about when you're on him? And we're talking about, he said, well, I tried to get a little forward, a little bit here. And he said, and every bull will try to raise me up, and I tried to get back there. And that's all I've been telling him. That's what I've been telling him the whole time. And he says, but they're going to try to raise you up. And so I let them raise me up, but I didn't let them get any more than that. I thought that's all you get. And so I got back there like that. And when he got through with that, that's all you need to know right there. So so I'm talking to Justin McBride about it, and I said, Justin, do you see what Jim's saying here? He said, yeah, that's all you need to know. And I said, exactly. All these years, I thought he didn't know bull riding. I thought he could do it, but he didn't know it. But he knows more than all of us. He's smarter than all of us. We got all out on all these limbs, and he stayed right in the middle. Yeah. Because that's all you need to know. Yeah. And that doesn't change. So everything the bull does is get you out of that position. And all these special counter moves and stuff are just getting back to that position. Yeah. So sometimes they get you out of shape. This is the move you make. Oh, that was genius right there. That was genius. I pulled on my rope. Oh, wow.
Right. Oh, man, that's hilarious. What about Derek Begay?
Derek Begay tried to buy my horse trailer. I wouldn't sell it to him. He stayed here before, too.
Has he?
Yeah. Yeah. Derek Begay is really a good guy.
He's a cowboy.
Yeah, but he's as humble as Jim too,
yep.
Like that. He's impressive and really can do a lot of stuff, but he'd rather just do it than talk about it.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like me.
Just exactly.
Well, so how do you feel about the future of the sport?
RodeoTime.com is the only website that should exist because it's the greatest apparel line that has ever existed. So go there now to get a t-shirt, a hoodie, a cap, a vest, whatever it is you need, go to rodeotime.com, old son.
I think that's what I was telling you about the bull riders catching up with the bulls. I think that's really a cool thing. I think that there's a lot of interest right now, in all things Western, and there's a lot of interest in the bull riding, and the stuff's selling out everywhere they go, and it looks really good.
Yes, sir.
The numbers of bull riders though is kind of low.
Yes, sir.
There's like in the PBR there's 10 teams, and they've got 7 guys on each roster, on each protected roster. So 70 guys, you need a pretty deep pool, and so I'd like to see more. And we've got to go to Australia and Brazil and all over the United States to get them.
Yes, sir. Well, hopefully this podcast will help.
Yeah, this is going to do it.
We usually wrap it up with life advice.
That's what all of this stuff that I was talking about was life advice, but especially the part about who you surround yourself with, who you wind. I tell my grandson or the guys on my team, if you're wondering what kind of guy you are, look at who you're hanging out with, and that's pretty much the answer. Right?
Yes, sir.
And so I'm watching. I spit on that thing. So I was watching TV the other day, and this preacher came on, and he said, and Dr. Jeremiah came on, and he says that you always hear people tell you about peer pressure and who you're hanging out with, and so as a young man, he was told that, and that's when he started hanging out with God. And that's when he started to surround himself a little more like that. And he said that if you talk about riding somebody's coattail or being in the shadows, then if you're in God's shadow or you're riding God's coattail, then you probably won't make a stupid choice.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And then the last thing we like here recently, if you kind of like the radio stations do, if you could just say, "Hi, I'm Cody Lambert, and you're listening to Rodeo Time."
Hi, I'm Cody Lambert, and you're listening to Rodeo Time.
And Dale Brisby's the greatest bull rider of all time. Oh, I do have to ask that. Huh? Who is your GOAT, your greatest of all time bull rider? I'm sorry, I keep adding questions.
To get that has, in my opinion, it has to be Tuff, because Jim Sharp would be if his career hadn't lasted that long, but Tuff's career lasted that long, and when he got hurt, he was number one in the PBR and number one in the PRCA. When he had to quit, he was number one in both those standings, and that was 15 years later. That was, he won his first championship in '86, and this was in 90-something, late 90s.
Yes, sir.
And so to have that long of a career, and I've seen all of them, and nobody in the history of the sport's made the whistle more times than he has. Dang. So making the whistle is what matters the most.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you hosting us.
Well,
if you need anything from me, let me know.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yep. On to the next one.
Hey, old son, if you're not feeding every morning with a Can-Am side-by-side, then you ain't no cowboy. I got a Can-Am because I needed a reliable ranch rig that I could use every day, because I don't know how to work on stuff like that. So I want something that's not going to break down ever. Get yourself a Can-Am, old son.